Today is May 28th, 2015, and we are interviewing Robert Pete Fulks of Rushville, Illinois, at the Masonic Hall in Rushville. Pete is 95 years old, and he was born on May 18th, 1920. My name is Michael Smith, and I'll be the interviewer, and Rita Corson will be the court reporter for this interview. So I'm going to ask you some biographical information here at first, Pete. Where were you born?
I was born on a farm just outside of Littleton, Illinois.
And who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Well, my father was Harold Doc Fulks, and my mother was Jeanette Horney Fulks. And my father built the first filling station in Littleton, and he operated a Standard Oil filling station for 35 years up there. My mother was a teacher. She taught 10 years in country one-room school, and she taught some music to the Littleton school, also taught piano lessons. She played piano and organ in the Methodist Church for most all of her adult life.
Okay. Did you have any siblings?
No.
No. Only child. Did your father serve in the military?
Yes, he was in right at the tail end of World War I, but he didn't go overseas. Okay,
what branch was he in?
Well, he was in the Army and was stationed over at Carthage, Illinois.
Okay. So you were raised in Littleton. You went to high school.
Yes, when I was 10 years old, we moved into Littleton. Littleton at that time was about 130 or 350 people, I think. And I went through high school. That was my home through high school, college, and during my time in the military.
And you went to high school where?
Rushville High School.
Rushville, okay.
I graduated from Rushville. Littleton had a 2-year school.
Okay. So what were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, I was, one of the things I did, I played 1 year of minor league baseball out in Kansas, and had a contract for the next year to go to New York Giant farm team. But while we were in Kansas, we let someone talk us into, the players were pretty much draft age, signing up for the draft out in Junction City, Kansas. When the season was over, we didn't anymore get home, and we were notified that we were to be ready for the draft. And I wasn't quite ready yet. I had 1 quarter left to finish up my college, and that's what I was going to do. So it ended up that I took a defense job in St. Louis at the Curtiss-Wright Aircraft Factory, and that deferred me from the draft for the time being, at least. And
what year would that have been, approximately?
That would have been 1941.
Okay.
That would have been September 1941. And guess where I lived? Ferguson, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
I lived there for nearly a year. Of course, it was a quiet little town of about 3,000 or 4,000 then, only about 4 or 5 miles from the airport.
Okay.
But I worked there for about a year, and they started drafting those my age out of the workforce, and that's when I enlisted in the Air Force.
Okay, and you went to school at Western, right?
Yes.
In Macomb.
Yeah.
And you were quite an athlete, I understand.
Well, I got to play 4 years of basketball and baseball for Western.
Okay, and that was before you went into the minor
Yes,
league?
I started there in 1937 through 41 would have been my 41 would have been my graduating year.
Okay. So you went into the Army Air Corps, is that correct?
I enlisted in the Air Force, and they sent me to Chicago, Fort Sheridan. I signed in, and this would have been October 1942, and they told me, well, I was going to have to wait. There was no openings yet. And believe it or not, I waited 5 months before they called me up. I even took a job at home before they called me. And then they sent me to San Antonio, Texas, to pre-flight school. And we even had to wait there 3 weeks before they assigned us to Class 44A, which meant I would graduate in January of 1944. And of course there I went to Sauk, Missouri for primary, to Coffeyville, Kansas for basic training, and to Pampa, Texas for advanced training.
Okay.
So I went through all those and graduated in Pampa, Texas.
In what year would that have been?
That would have been 44A. It was January 1944.
Okay, okay. So where did you go after that?
Well, I had, Pampa was a twin-engine school, but I had always signed up. I wanted fighter planes all along. But they sent me to Harlingen, Texas, and I got checked out in the AT-6, which is a trainer plane, but it was designed with a 50 caliber machine gun in the back seat, and we trained gunners for the bombers that were going to be on the B-17s and B-24s. And what I would do I'd fly the gunners over a gunner's range, which was, I'm trying to think of the name, it slips my mind right now. But they had targets out in the water, and they would fire at the targets in the water, and you'd fly them out there. I picked up about 150 hours of flight time down there in about 4 or 5 months. And
okay.
Finally, as an AT-6 pilot, I got word that I was to go to Greensboro, North Carolina, which was an ORD, Overseas Replacement Depot, and I couldn't believe that they were sending an AT-6 pilot overseas. And from there I went to Norfolk, Virginia, and on a transport ship. We didn't know where, but we ended up in Naples, Italy.
Naples, Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do there?
Well, from there I did get my assignment that I was to go to a fighter outfit, which really I was happy to do that, but I wondered what they were going to do with an AT-6 pilot. But I went to the 52nd Fighter Group, and they were 12 of us. I found out when I got there that had no training in the plane we were going to fly. And normal training for combat was 200 hours in the plane you were going to fly combat. And none of the 12 that were assigned there then. Now when we arrived over there, it was about D-Day. Okay. And we weren't getting any word on D-Day. And we didn't know what. We finally decided that they were stockpiling pilots in the 8th Air Force, and they were running short of pilots in the 15th, the reason we were sent there. But they started out to greeted us with open arms and said we'd get checked out of P-51, we wouldn't have any trouble.
This is in Italy?
This is in Italy.
Still in Italy, okay.
They sent me to Madna, which is Air Force or base, which was over by Termoli, Italy, on the east coast by the spur of Italy that comes down. And there they said they would check us out in the P-51. Well, they went through the manual with us, and the next day, four of us were lined up on the taxi strip ready to take off. There was no instructor with you. You're the only one in the plane. And I went from a 650 horsepower plane to 1,650.
It's a big jump.
A little difference. But some of the others had flown the P-40, and they were a little more ready to fly the 51 than I was, I guess. But anyway, we were on the taxi strip. The first plane went out. Was given the okay to take off. Made a nice takeoff. And the second plane was getting ready to go on the runway, but somehow he turned too quick, and the tail came off of the taxi strip, hit a rock, and knocked the tail wheel off of the plane. About that time, the first plane that had taken off came in high and hot and passed halfway down the runway, and one wing dipped down and got it cartwheeled around and skidded all the way down the end of the runway. Didn't catch on fire. Came almost going into the Adriatic Sea. The guy walked away from it, and one of the crew chiefs said, "We flew all last week missions and didn't lose a plane. In 15 minutes, we've one completely destroyed and another one out of order."
Oh my!
So they brought in a old P-40. And P-40 had patches on it, had bullet holes in it. And one of the guys that had flown P-40 said, the way he put it was kind of funny, I thought. He said, "That plane's old enough that Abraham Lincoln flew it in the Civil War." And, well, anyway, we all did get checked out. It was an easy plane to fly. We didn't have any problems then. Then they sent us to...
But you didn't get in a P-51 at that time?
Yes, we were not in a 51, no.
No, I mean when those other guys.
No.
No, okay.
And all of us flew the P-40, checked out,
yes.
The 12. Then they sent us to Casablanca, to ferry planes from Casablanca to Tunis, and it was about 1,000 miles, and we'd go from Tunis, Oran, Algiers. From Casablanca, Oran, Algiers, and Tunis. And I made 2 trips, and on the third trip...
This is in which plane?
This is 51. They were shipping the 51s into Casablanca. They were assembling them, then we were transporting them over to Tunis.
Correct, okay.
Where they were then, I suppose someone was taking them to Italy then.
So that was the first time you'd ever flown a P-51?
Yes.
There. Okay.
And but we didn't have any problems until I took off on the third trip. They said, "Well, smoke's coming out of your wing," and so I went in and landed in a hurry. But I found out the crew chief left the gas cap off of the left wing tank, and there was gasoline was siphoning out of the tank. And so I had to wait about an hour, and they asked me if I wanted to fly it alone. And so I said yes. It was an easy trip. All you had to do was go to the Mediterranean and follow the coastline. And so I took off and decided to correct a little bit to the left, make sure I didn't miss Oran. and I could see the Mediterranean at almost at the coast. I looked out, and there was a Messerschmitt 109 coming in on my left side.
German plane.
German plane, and I saw some puffs of black smoke behind me. They were firing ack-ack. Well, I rolled over, did a barrel roll going straight down, and pulled up in about a 20-degree climb, and he started after me, but he quit. He stopped, and I think what had happened, I'd gone across the borderline, found out I was in a neutral nation, Spanish Morocco.
Okay.
Nobody told me anything about it. We didn't. So I just corrected too much and got in a neutral nation there. But then we went ahead, and I went ahead and flew all the way to Tunis, and one more mission, and we were ready to go back to our outfit then.
I think I'd asked you one time how you practiced with the machine guns.
Well, when we got back, why the pilots became instructors to all 12 of us, teach us exactly what we would expect in combat. And we had about 8 trips with each time, with 8 trips with our instructors. And I was one of the few that never fired a gun, and one of the ways that I got to fire the gun was have the instructor fly about 200 feet on a good sunshiny day over the Adriatic, and I'd fly about 100 feet, and I'd fire at the shadow in the water. That's how I got my gunnery.
That's how you learned to shoot the machine gun on the plane. Mm-hmm. And how many machine guns were on those planes that you had?
Well, the old model P-51B had 4, 2 on each wing, and the new P-51D had 3, had 6 altogether. I flew the old one mostly. Most of us did fly the old one.
And it did have an advantage, I think you told me, over the newer one, didn't it? Was it lighter or more maneuverable?
It was, I think the bubble canopy slowed it down just a little bit. But you could see so much better with the bubble canopy, the newer plane.
Okay. So you get your training in with your P-51?
Yeah, I got my training in, and they said, well, we'll fly our first mission. The first mission was at Friedrichshafen, Germany, and it was, they called it a milk run. It was an easy mission, only about 3.5 hours round trip. And then
what'd you do on that mission? Do you remember?
Well, it was just escort the bombers.
Okay.
And there weren't any enemy planes or anything. We just escorted.
Can you explain how you did that when you did that?
We escorting the fighters would go much faster than the bombers. Your cruising speed was about 260 miles an hour, and the bombers only about 180. So what you would do, one squadron would take the bombers so far, then another fighter group would come in and take them another segment. They do that all the way to the target, and different groups would come in and escort them back. But we would fly out on one side or the other of the plane, right along with them, but we'd have to zigzag to stay with them.
How many bombers were on a run typically?
Well, most of what we would see would probably about 50 or 60, but when those raids were on with the 15th and the 8th Air Force, there'd be over 1,000 bombers in the air at a time.
My.
You could see contrails, white trails coming from their propellers
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something we'll never see again.
No. Well, go ahead with some of your other missions then.
Flew 2 missions to southern France where we strafed the beaches and to explode landmines. Every once in a while you hit one, it'd boom and spray your wings with sand.
How low were you when you did that?
Well, we'd come in, probably get down to about 10 feet or something like that.
That close to the beach?
Yeah, and we did that 2 different times. And I didn't go on the Southern France invasions. Our group did, but I didn't fly that. At Southern France invasion, there was very little opposition to the landings for the troops. But we did try to prepare the beaches for them to land. Then I went 2 missions to Bolesti. That was really the tough one for the bombers. They had, we always saw them lose 3 or 4 planes every time they'd be shot down over the target. We'd be outside the target. We set out and had a view of it. Of course, one time we had the Hermann Göring Yellow Noses come in, and what they would do, they'd try to decoy us, get us to follow them. Then another group would come in and shoot down the bombers.
Oh, okay.
But that happened, I guess, so we were aware of it, didn't follow them. Then, my last mission was we got the Presidential Unit Citation for destroying 60 planes on the ground at the Reagan Airfield in Romania. That wasn't over 40 or 50 miles from Poland, and but our group did receive the Presidential Unit Citation for destroying 60 planes. I think they had 7 planes in the air. One guy got credit for shooting a plane down. The fellow was landing and only about that high off the ground. They gave him credit for shooting a plane out
yeah.
in the air.
So you strafed the planes that were on the ground on that mission then, basically?
Yes, the planes were on the ground on that.
Did you receive fire back when you were there on that trip? Or
yes, you'd see the Germans used tracers. You'd see those tracers just go by you like that.
Okay.
And I had, in all the missions I flew, I ended up with 7 bullet holes. One in the propeller. My plane was really out of sync going back. I didn't know what it was, but that bullet hole put the propeller a little bit out of sync on it. It just vibrated.
Was that the plane? The only time you got to fly your own plane?
Well, my own plane, I picked up about a 20 millimeter hole in the tail. It was about the size of a softball. Went through the tail of the plane.
What'd you name your plane?
Number 37. That was my number in college.
Okay.
It wasn't a lucky number then either, I guess.
No, but you never. It put that plane out of commission at that point. Is it?
Well, it was pretty close to my 18th mission, so it wasn't fixed for me yet. They would have had it back in order for too long.
I think you told me that on these, sometimes you just go out on strafing missions on a time or two.
Yes, well, a lot of times, if we escorted quite a ways away, and we came home, we'd come home on the deck, and it was look for anything that moved. And I think I told you that one fellow shot an oxen, and
yes,
and well, there'd be sailboats or anything within we thought was where the Germans might be.
Was there cameras on your planes?
Oh yes.
So you reviewed those when you got back then?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. This fellow shot the oxen. When they show you view them. He really got booed. And they,
I could see why. Sounds like he was target practicing.
Yeah.
Well, that leads us up to your 18th mission, and I'd like for you to tell me about that one.
Well, 18th mission, the 52nd Fighter Group, they had 3 squadrons, the 2nd, the 4th, and the 5th Squadron, and we all took off together, and I think it was over Sarajevo that we parted, and each squadron had a target, and our target was Lapovo, L-A-P-O-V-O, Yugoslavia, or Serbia really, and it was south of Belgrade, about 60 miles.
Excuse me, but that was on September 3rd, 1944, right?
Yeah, September 3rd.
Okay.
And there was a marshalling yard there, and they had a train or a steam locomotive and about 6 or 8 boxcars, and we made 4 passes and didn't think anybody was shooting at us. So that we hit the train, the first pass, and the steam was just coming out of it. And you want to be careful on boxcars because if they've got ammunition on them, you want to start firing at them way back because you can shoot yourself down by having them explode when you have to go through it.
Mm.
But that never happened to me or any time I was on a mission. But we were told about it. But anyway, on my 4th pass, I'd just gone over the train and I let down probably about 10 feet off the ground, and my airspeed indicator would be where I could touch it like that. And all of a sudden it exploded. And then I felt a thud, and they called me and told me I was losing white smoke. I was losing all the coolant. My engine stopped right then. But my airspeed was somewhere probably a little bit under 400 mile an hour. And I had enough speed that I could get at least a mile or 2 away. So I found a cornfield, but it was 90 degrees. I had to make a turn into the cornfield, and I couldn't get the plane down. I was going a little too fast. So I flew it down into the ground, and it bounced up and then back down, and I could see a hedgerow coming up real fast, and the fuselage of the plane found an opening, and I squirted on through there and left the wings and
tore the wings off.
Yes, and they said I called and told them I was okay, and they saw me get out of the plane and took off running. And you know, I don't really remember that. And well, anyway, they came in and strafed my plane and set it on fire. My own squadron did, in order to destroy the radio crystal. They didn't want the Germans getting the frequency. So only thing I kind of remember, I went out in the middle of this cornfield and I laid face down. And I didn't, I guess, wake up for about an hour. And when I did wake up, I couldn't see. And I found out that I had cut my head, and blood had run down my eyes and it dried. One eye popped open, and I found out that that's what it was. But what I hadn't realized that I'd hit there's a crossbar in the canopy of the plane I must have hit it pretty hard because I think it kind of dazed me and cut my head. I didn't even know I had to cut until I woke up finally. But I got up and started moving around, and we've been told that the rural area in Serbia would be friendly, probably. And it happened.
Is Serbia and Yugoslavia the same
Well,
place?
Serbia is part of Yugoslavia at that time.
Okay.
See, they're all in different countries now, Bosnia and all that, but and Serbia is separate now. But they were all together, and they were called Yugoslavia.
Okay.
But anyway, I started out walking up a kind of an abandoned road, and I could hear voices. And so I went out in the cornfield, decided I would take a look first before I go around the road. And this was a Sunday morning, about noon by that time. And there was a family there with a couple of kids, and 4 of them, husband and wife. They had a tablecloth on the ground and having a picnic. Couldn't believe it, with all the air battles going on, that they could go out and have a picnic.
How far did you walk to get to that?
Oh, it wasn't over a couple blocks.
Oh, that close, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I decided, well, I'd as well find out now whether they're friendly. I carried a .45 revolver. I unbuckled that, but I didn't reach for it or anything. I walked out, and it startled them. They really act a little bit frightened. And I said, I'm American. And then all of a sudden they said, Americanus. And they greeted me with open arms. And I wanted to drink water, and I made a motion I wanted to drink. They gave me something clear that happened to be Slivovitz, which is plum brandy. It was pretty strong stuff. But anyway, I wanted water. They finally gave me some water. And they fed me. They had chicken there. They gave me a piece of chicken, and they ended up taking me to their home, and the lady took my clothes and washed them. I had a cap. It was all bloody, and they got it and brought a nurse in that took care of my head. I don't know what all she did. I don't think she took any stitches, but she put something on it to help it. So they took care of me, and the next.
Could you speak any English? Could they, or?
I had a little booklet that had every country that you'd fly over. It have some words like drink or can you hide me, or different things like that.
Okay.
So I was able to show them those words, and we finally, strange, after being there, when I was there all the time, I finally got so I could understand quite a bit of the language. I couldn't speak it. I tried to phrase it in English, but they'd laugh at me when I phrase it that way. But anyway, they took care of me, and the townspeople started coming out there, the mayor, and I don't know what all. And they took those pictures. You probably seen the pictures I had, and they gave me a set, and I was able to keep those and get them home.
That's wonderful.
But after about the 3rd day, they said they would have a way for me to get back to Italy, that they'd take me to a place where an American C47 plane would land and pick up me and several other down flyers and take us right back to Italy. So I thought I was going to get out in about 3 or 4 days. So they sent 2 fellas on a cart, and I sat on the back with my back to them, facing toward the back, and we rode for probably over an hour to take me to this place where the C47s were to land. And all of a sudden they stopped and turned around, and I could see there was 2 horsemen probably about 3 blocks away, and they were a little afraid it was the Tito partisans, and they started moving away from them, and the horses started coming toward us, and they told me to get my .45 out and fire. I fired 2 shots, and the horsemen didn't follow us, but we took off in a gallop. And we got back, and I was there another couple of days, and they said I was to go to another place where they would have C47s. I'd head for a place called Kragujevac. Yugoslavia. I know it was about 40 miles, and we probably walked most of the day before we got there. I'd never walked that far in my life. But we got there and we stayed, but they didn't act like they knew anything about a plane or anything, but they left me with a family with a real nice home. I think that they had been wealthy people. But from there, they told me again I was to find a place that they have the C47, so they headed back, and we came to what was more like a little school or something like that. It had tables in it, and the whole group, about 30 some Chetnik soldiers there, and they were having a pretty good time drinking Slivovitz. But we came in there, and they had a bus that was there, and the bus had it was one of those charcoal burner buses. I never did figure out how it worked, but it was a charcoal burner bus. It would hold about 20 people. And they said they were going to take us to a town called Milanovac. And the bus would hold about 20 people, and I got a seat on the left rear side of the back of the bus, and all 30 of those Chetnik soldiers were on that 20. They were standing and everything else. We were about ready to leave, and all at once there was a burst of machine gun fire, and I could hear those bullets hitting that bus. I can hear them yet. And yelling and screaming, and everybody trying to get off the bus. And I always said I was the second one off in the back, but I wasn't quite that fast, I guess. But I got off in a hurry, and I took off running, and everybody was running. And we were running down the road, and all of a sudden another burst of machine gun fire, and I heard the bullets zing off the road, and we jumped in a ditch, started crawling, and finally there was no more gunfire. We got up and we kept running, and it was about 10 miles from Milanovac, and we finally made it in there. We stayed all night in some public building and slept on the floor. And the next day I met a fellow by the name of Dan. Dan spoke English, and he took care of me all the time I was in Milanovac. And he found a place for us to stay. elderly couple, and that night we went to bed and had a bed to sleep in. And in the middle of the night there was a loud explosion, and we looked out the window and there was looked like about a 20 millimeter gun. And what had happened, the Tito partisans had captured the town, or they were capturing the town, and the Chetniks were left.
So this was kind of a civil war going on in the middle of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's a funny thing, the Chetniks would fight the Germans, the partisans would fight the Germans, they would both help the Americans, but most of their fighting was against one another.
Okay.
But anyway, this elderly couple was afraid that we'd get caught there and put us up in the attic of the house.
You were with Dan at that point?
Yes, Dan was with me.
And
we went up in the attic of the house, and we were there 6 days. It was, and all that time we were up there was a place in the roof that we could kind of look out and see, and each day the partisans were marching about 100 people up to the town square, and we didn't know what was happening at the time, but I found out later. They'd pick one person out and execute him in front of the crowd, and then they would send them back, and the next day they just happened 4 days in a row. We watched them march by there. Of course, we didn't know at that time what was happening. But all that time, partisan officers were sleeping in the bed that we were in downstairs. And we were up in the attic, so we had to be real quiet. And we didn't have any water for 3.5 days, or any food. But finally they put a bottle of water up and some food for us. And then there was some firing began about late in the afternoon and evening. And it was dark and the firing stopped, nothing. And we saw the partisans marching out of town, and the next morning the Germans came in and took over the town. And German officers slept in the same bed that we were in.
You're still in the attic?
We're still in the attic. But the Germans only wanted the main roads. They weren't guarding the town. And that night, Dan and I walked out of it and were able to get away. And a young boy joined us, and we were going along, and we could hear some wagon wheels, like wagons, and some noise. And all of a sudden, about a patrol of 4 or 5 partisan troops came out and were right with us. And Dan, of course, spoke the language, and he motioned us to stay back, this young boy and I. So we just stood there, and finally we just kind of walked backwards, and the young boy jumped in the ditch. I walked backward a little farther, and I finally got in the ditch and crawled as fast as I could to get as far away as I could. I never saw the young boy, or I never saw Dan again, so I don't know. I stayed in that ditch all night, and the next day I was close to a house. I went there, and they brought in some Chetnik soldiers, and they were then sent me to a place called Charchak. I think I'm pronouncing it quite right, but C-A-C-A-K was the way they spelled it. And they sent me to an elderly couple that had a chicken farm. And they were in a house that it's just one big room, bedroom on one side and kitchen, and they had a cot on the other side. But I had eggs for breakfast. I had never had that before while I was over there.
How many days are we talking about roughly now since you'd crashed?
This is about 30 days.
Okay.
And well, anyway, I looked out the window, and here came a German officer. Oh, I forgot to say this. This house only had one door, front door. Wasn't any way I could get away. And the lady put me under the cot in the kitchen. The German came in, sat down, and they could kind of talk to one another. He sat there and visited, bought some eggs. And first thing I knew, he left, but he was there for about 15 minutes. I was afraid I was going to sneeze or do something, but he finally walked out. The next day, they brought a young lady by the name of Lana to help me move from there. And we had to go right through the middle of town of Charchak and across a river. And but what they did, they gave me some clothes to dress up like a Serbian, and they wrapped my neck with white cloth. And if anybody stopped them, they would take me to the doctor, and I couldn't talk. And so she had a horse and cart. We rode right down through the middle of Charchak. German soldiers just walking up down both sides of the streets while we went through there. And we came to the river, and they had a guard there. And she was a pretty nice looking young lady. I think she kind of gave him the eye and said a couple words. He didn't question us. Go on. And she took me to a family by the name of Stepanovich. And there was a father and son, the father, mother, and the son, and the grandparents. They all lived there, and I stayed there a little over 2 weeks. They really took good care of me. I slept between sheets and had food, but while I was there, one morning there was a screaming. A lady came just screaming. And she only lived about a block from there. Her husband was a major in the Chetnik army, and I think this Stepanovich was in the Chetnik army too, because he's been gone at night a lot of time. But anyway, found out that the Tito partisans, they came in their house while they were having breakfast. Their 2 children and the lady and their husband having breakfast. They shot him, took his boots, and left. And she came screaming, of course. They had, the way they had their services then, they buried them, and all the services for a week. They go back and forth to the cemetery. And she had they call it wailing. I don't know whether I'm describing it right or not, but it was an eerie sound that she would make every morning and every evening, and it was supposed to scare the evil from the dead, I think. That went on for a week.
My.
And, but but I was there for another 2 weeks. And the Russians finally came in to Charchak area, and the Germans were moving out. And they sent me to, about a 2-hour walk with some Chetnik soldiers to a home where there was a whole lot of Chetnik soldiers, and there were also some partisans. And they had kind of gotten together. I didn't know why, but they said there was going to be 2 Russian officers come there on horseback and talk to them. But it was really a sad time for the Chetnik people, the ladies, and they were all crying, and it was a terrible thing to see. They knew the Russians were coming in. They knew which side they were going to be with. They would be with Tito communist partisan group. But anyway, toward evening, the 2 horsemen, they had binoculars, or they could see them coming, and the 2 Russian officers. And it ended up, I didn't know where they had them, but they had 8 German prisoners there. They brought them out the first time I had seen them. And the 8 German prisoners and the Russians and I then took off. And we had to walk. And one of the German prisoners was wounded, and he was real bad. And we had to carry him on a stretcher. 4 of them would carry him for a while. I helped carry him, and we went till about midnight, and we got close to the German lines, and some trench mortars started coming in. Well, first of all, one of the Russians asked me if I wanted to ride a horse. I got up on the horse. About the time I got up on the horse, a trench mortar came in. They all jumped in the ditch. And here I was sitting on top of that horse. And so I got off that horse in a hurry. We had several rounds come by, but none of them were really that close.
Who was that, from the Germans, you think?
From the Germans, yeah.
Okay, okay.
But anyway, we finally got to the Russian lines, and we left the German wounded prisoner. I'm sure they didn't even take a look at him. I'm sure that was all of him. But the rest of us then were escorted by Russian enlisted men. And we found a place in a barn to sleep at night. They just slept in the upper part of the barn, and I was with the Germans down below. And
did the Russians know you were an American at that time?
Yes, they were, and the enlisted men were told I was, I guess. But anyway, the next day we started out, and we were walking, and it was a little chilly. It was in the latter part of October, and they wore some long overcoats. And one of the things that happened I thought was a little strange, but the Russian decided to take his overcoat off, and he handed his machine gun over to the German to hold while he took his overcoat off. And
wow.
Well, anyway, we went ahead, and we ended up in Milanovic, where I was hidden in the attic.
You ended up back there again.
We went back there. There was Russian soldiers all over the place. But they put me and the 7 German prisoners all together as prisoners. And I got to, so I could talk a little bit with the Germans, and they were all older fellows, most of them in their 50s. And they hadn't been home for, I think, 2 or 3 years. They didn't know what all was going on at all. And I wonder whatever happened to them. But anyway, the guard had come around, and I tell him I want someone that spoke English. And the ones that brought us there, they forgot that I was an American, I guess, and they just put me in with them. But anyway, nothing happened, so I finally told the guard I'd give him my wristwatch if he'd bring somebody that spoke English. And he brought major, and he was Russian, but he had the name of Peterson. And he spoke 7 languages, and English was, he could speak pretty good English. But anyway, he got me out of there and put me in with the Russian group officers, and I was with them, and I think I told you how we'd eat. They had a whole big, iron kettles out in the yard, just sitting out there open, full of macaroni. And they'd build a fire under it, and had a big bowl, and there 4 of the Russian officers and myself put the bowl in the middle and give everybody a spoon. You'd all eat out of the same bowl. And while we were there, a Russian major came in, and you popped too. You jumped to attention when any officer came in for the Russians. And they were a little late in getting up, and he dressed them down, but then he came back, did it again, and I looked at his arm, and he was wearing my watch. He'd taken it from the enlisted man. He was full of vodka. And he came in again, and one of the guys kind of winked or something and the officer saw him. He hauled off and knocked that officer clear across the room and walked out. And the other officer just laughed, thought it was funny.
Oh my.
So anyway, this Peterson finally told me there was another American who was shot down the same day I was. And he, by the name of Joe Granderson, he was in my 52nd Fighter Group, a different squadron. But his plane caught on fire. He hadn't buckled his helmet, and the fire came up through the cockpit of the plane and burned his ears off and really scarred him up. But this Peterson had been out and told me he was there. And anyway, he had a nurse that had taken care of him all the time and really nursed him back. There was a lady, the nurse was named Nada, and she had married the Draza Mihailovich's son, and Draza Mihailovich was the general that was really the general over the Serbian people and the Chetnik army. While King Peter he had to leave, and he was in England at the time, so Mihailovich was really over the Chetniks and the Serbian people. But she married his son, and anyway, they said that they could take us to Belgrade, and there was an American embassy there that we could go to and make arrangements to get back to Italy. So that's what this Peterson took Joe Granderson, myself, and Nada, and we stayed all night with her sister in Belgrade. And the next morning we went to that American group that were making arrangements for us to leave, but they didn't believe that we were Americans. We didn't have uniforms on or anything. So Joe had played baseball for Texas, and I, of course, had played baseball for Western, and we wanted to know who won the World Series. And that was the year the St. Louis Cardinals beat the St. Louis Browns in the World Series, and we could name about everybody on each team. So that's the way they believed we were Americans.
St. Louis Cardinals played the St. Louis Browns?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know they had two teams in St. Louis.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they ended up putting us on a plane and sent us back to Italy. And it happened to be, when we arrived, it was the Roosevelt had defeated Dewey. It was announcing it in the presidential election.
So that was November 7th?
That what?
November 7th?
Yeah, yes.
So you escaped captivity from September 3rd till November 7th?
Yeah.
So how did they greet you when you got back to Italy?
Well, real good. They, of course, I had to go to a doctor, and Joe went to a doctor. They put him in the hospital right away. But they sent me, saw me for about half an hour and talked to me a little bit about it. And I went back to my outfit. And from there, I was given some medals and made arrangements for me to go home then.
They didn't put you back in a plane again there?
No, not there. I became what I call a repatriate. And so I went back to Naples and got on a ship back to New York.
Saw the Statue of Liberty, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. And from there back to Fort Sheridan, and then I went home. Got home for Christmas. And my letter, kind of funny, my folks, of course, didn't know I was back until they got a letter from me, and I notified them before the military got the information that I was safe.
Did they know you'd been shot down?
Oh my, yes, yeah. Yeah, they got that word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bet they were worried about you, big time.
Yeah, so that was a good Christmas for us, and I always remember it.
Well, let's just go a little bit further from there, Pete. That wasn't the end of your military service by any means. That wasn't the end of your military service.
No.
Just kind of.
They sent me to Miami first, and they really questioned me on everything. Said I was one of the few who'd been with the Russians, and they want to know all about that. So I spent 2 weeks down there.
Okay.
They call it a repatriation center.
And that was before Christmas?
Well, that's after I spent 2 weeks at home, and that's when I went back to active duty.
Okay. And you told me you did some specialized training when you came back. If you want to touch on a little bit of that.
Well, we from Miami, they sent me. I ended up in trying to think where I went first here.
That help you?
Yeah, Hayward. I was trying to think of Hayward, couldn't think of it. I went to Hayward. That's where I was really stationed. I went through those other places, but I wasn't there very long.
Hayward,
California. I went to Hayward, and
that's in California. Yeah.
That's outside of Oakland. That's right. You can't tell when you go out of one end to the other. But another fellow and I, we got back into the AT-6s, and they had us do what we call tracking missions. And there were ships being brought into the San Francisco Bay, and they were back for repairs or something. But they wanted to practice their gunnery practice and everything. So this other fellow and I would fly AT-6s attack the ships, and they would take camera gunnery of us. They'd have us go from every direction, up high, down low, and everything. Then we would also do the same thing at the base of the San Francisco Bay Bridge.
Golden Gate Bridge?
They had Golden Gate Bridge. They had gun emplacement at each base of each of it. And we'd attack those points, and then there was a big, huge cannon out at the entrance to the San Francisco Bay. And the thing that amazed me, I was able to find a picture of that on my computer.
Oh.
But they'd have us attack that cannon, and there was a place where just to open up, that cannon come out. Of course, they had anti-aircraft, and we were to attack that, and they would practice gunnery on us there.
Photo gunnery, is that what they did?
Yeah, practice camera gunnery.
Yes.
But from there I went to Van Nuys, and from there I flew a bomber, and we ended up flying tow target. And planes would come in and fire at your target.
You towed a target behind your plane?
Yes, we'd fly about 100 miles out in the ocean, and they'd fire at you, and we'd go back. And I did that for about 2 months, and finally I was sent to Muroc Base, which is now Edwards Air Force Base. And I got back into tracking again, but that was in a P-51, and we were flying against the B-29s. I'd make fly missions attacking them from every angle. They'd tell you where they want to head on, they want above, or want back. And we do that for about a half an hour. And they'd fire at you, or I say fire at you, camera gunnery.
Okay. One thing you forgot to mention was, and I don't know which point it was, but when you're at the Golden Gate Bridge, you were with another pilot that you said was a really an ace pilot.
Oh,
tell that little story.
He could defeat me every time in a dogfight, which usually you do that. You do a lot of dogfighting and just practicing.
Sure.
But he flew under the Golden Gate Bridge and did an Immelman, where he does a half roll and rolls out on top. And I didn't follow him. I kicked myself ever since for not following him.
You could have said you flew under the Golden Gate Bridge.
I didn't do it. But anyway, I had flown there, and we gotten word we were really about on our way to the Pacific. Wasn't going to be long. But I'd gotten at least back in the 51 and got quite a few hours at Edwards Air Force Base, and the atomic bomb came along, and that was it.
So you got to go home.
Yeah.
Well, I got a couple follow-up questions, and that's quite a story you've told us. And you remember it in vivid detail. Just like it happened yesterday, it seems like.
Well, I did kind of go over a little bit.
No, that's fine. When you got out of the service, how were you received by your family and community?
Well, the community, everybody was home and everybody was happy.
Yeah.
And it was really a great time, I tell you. It was a lot different than the people from Vietnam War and everything they had bad.
Right.
And
what did you do after you got out of the military?
well, I wanted to get back in baseball. I wrote the New York Giants, and they didn't even answer me.
Oh. They'd forgotten about you, huh?
But I did apply for job, I guess, my brain's not working again. But I wanted to fly in the planes, and that's something
You wanted to continue flying?
Yeah, but I didn't have enough hours to get into any kind of flying then.
Okay.
I only had a little over 1,000 hours, and of course pilots were a dime a dozen from
After the
World
war.
War II.
Sure.
But I did go ahead and get my instructor's license, and but I never used it. And I got back, I went, finished college, and got my master's, and ended up in principal and coach and teacher at Rushville Junior High School for 32 years.
Okay. And you got married? How were you married? How long after the service?
Yeah, Betty Andre, we were married for 58 years. One of the things I really feel like I'm so lucky. The good Lord somehow has given me a few extra years to do some of the things I still like to do.
Yeah.
I was married to a wonderful lady.
How soon after the war did you get married?
It was 1950. We got
Okay.
married. And she was a great lady and a great mother. And
You have one son, is that
I
right?
had one son, my son Doug. He's my savior. He really is. He's keeps me doing things that I probably wouldn't do, and I think he's added years of my life. So I feel like I've really been lucky. And
Well,
my parents, I don't want to forget them. They did a lot of sacrificing during the Depression years to see that I got a college education.
Sure. Yes. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up, Pete, and I want to thank you for your service.
Well,
It was people like you that make our country what it is. And
there's 500 or more that could tell the same story. They were picked up that many out of Yugoslavia.
yeah. Well, you got quite a story. You were lucky several times there, it sounds like.
Well,
The good Lord was looking after you.
well, yeah, I know I'm lucky.
I forgot to show a picture of you here. This was taken in 1944, and I want to hold that up in front of the camera so people can see what a good-looking fellow you were. And
Well,
I think that'll wrap it up. So.
okay.